15 years ago, I ended my marriage because I found out my husband was cheating with a childhood friend and even had a child with her. This made me very upset and almost made me quit my job. But during that tough time, my current husband helped me and we made a happy home together. However, my happiness didn't last long. Recently, I saw my ex-husband for the first time in 15 years. He said mean things to me, like I must still be single because nobody would want to marry someone like me who couldn't have kids, but I surprised him by introducing him to my children. When I introduced my son, my ex-husband was shocked and scared. I told him about my life now. I'm Florence, 38 years old. I live with my 13-year-old son Max, my 11-year-old daughter Ava, and my husband David, who is the same age as me. Max is in middle school and going through a rebellious phase. He can be cheeky sometimes, but my husband David knows how to handle him. Ava loves makeup and fashion, and she knows how to get what she wants because she's the youngest and a girl. Max really cares about Ava, so when she jokes about not liking him if he's not nice to me, he quickly apologizes and promises to be good. He's charming and always knows how to make things fun. So, even though my life is busy, it's also full of joy. But there's something people might not know about me. I've been divorced once and am now happily married for the second time. I got divorced because my ex-husband, who I'll call Jack, did something really hurtful. It happened 15 years ago when we were both in college. We were happy together at first, talking about how much we wanted kids and imagining what it would be like to be parents. But even after trying for a while, we didn't get pregnant. Every month, when my period came, it caused tension between us. We tried to figure out why we couldn't have kids, spending a lot of money on treatments, but doctors couldn't find anything wrong. Despite this, my husband started getting frustrated and blaming me for our infertility. He'd say things like, "When will I ever become a father?" and make sarcastic comments that made me feel bad. He stopped helping around the house, saying it was my job because I couldn't have kids. He made me feel like our marriage was pointless because I couldn't fulfill my role as a woman. Afterwards, my husband's words got meaner. He'd say things like, "My sister's having her second baby already. Isn't that great? They're on their second, and we haven't even had our first." He'd look at me with a harsh expression, making fun of me and putting me down. He'd say, "If your body was normal, we have kids by now." I'd try to defend myself, saying we didn't know the reason for our infertility yet, but he'd just say, "It's always the woman's fault for not having babies. If I knew you couldn't have kids, I wouldn't have married you. You should feel guilty." His words hurt me a lot. On top of that, my in-laws would call, excitedly asking when they get a grandchild. At first, I tried to brush it off, saying it takes time, but it didn't help. My mother-in-law started blaming me, saying I was useless for not having kids yet, especially since my sister-in-law had kids so easily. The pressure from them was overwhelming. One day, my friend Daisy invited me out. Jack, my ex-husband, had been busy with work, so he wasn't around much. That's when Daisy told me something shocking. She said, "I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. I have something important to tell you, Florence. I've missed you too." "What's up, Daisy?" "Remember Grace? She was Jack's childhood friend. They grew up near each other and their families were close. She went to the same college as us and now works with me. Grace, the daughter of the CEO at my job, got her position through family connections. We didn't really hang out in college since we were in different groups, and even at work, we didn't talk much because we worked in different departments. My husband introduced me to her once, calling her his friend and asking me to get along with her. But Grace didn't seem to like me, so I avoided her. Daisy, my friend, told me something surprising about Grace. She said, "I think your husband and Grace are having an affair." I couldn't believe it. Daisy had seen them holding hands, not just like friends. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I think you should find out more," Daisy said, offering to help me talk about it. I had suspected Jack was cheating. He'd always come home late, saying he had to work more. He was never around on weekends, busy entertaining clients. Even though I had a feeling, I tried to ignore it. But after hearing Daisy's warning, I went straight to a detective agency. I wanted proof of his infidelity. Within a week, they had enough evidence. But I wasn't ready to divorce him yet. Despite everything, I still remembered the promises we made to each other. I needed time to decide. A few days later, I got home to find Jack sitting at the dinner table, which was unusual because he usually came home late. "Oh, you're home. I thought you'd be late again," I said sarcastically. "Yeah, sorry about that. I need to talk to you, he replied. Knowing about the affair, I braced myself for bad news. I want a divorce, he said. What? I was shocked. I realized he wasn't just fooling around, he was serious about Grace. Grace is pregnant. I'm going to marry her, he added. I couldn't believe it. He had always said Grace was just a friend. Jack didn't seem to think he did anything wrong. He even said, "My mom wants me to divorce you. She thinks Grace is better because she's prettier and can have kids." Hearing this hurt a lot. Tears filled my eyes as Jack left, saying he was going back to Grace. I was too hurt to stop him. Later, I got divorce papers in the mail, with a note from Grace asking me to divorce Jack. It felt like a slap in the face. I wanted to say, "No, you're the one who took my husband." But I realized arguing wouldn't change anything. I was left with so many questions. Why was I being blamed? I couldn't just accept the divorce quietly. Determined to stand up for myself, I used the evidence I gathered from the detective agency to start divorce mediation. A few days after filing, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard Grace, Jack's mistress, yelling at me. She was furious that I had started a lawsuit. I calmly explained that it was the right thing to do given the situation and that I knew about her inappropriate behavior. She demanded compensation, even though she was pregnant. Her harsh words hurt me deeply. I told her we could discuss everything officially during the divorce mediation. In the mediation, the court recognized Jack and Lee's relationship as infidelity based on the evidence. Jack tried to blame my infertility. The court didn't buy it because there was no proof of my infertility within just a year of marriage. In the end, I received $220,000 as alimony from Jack and $110,000 from Grace. After finalizing the divorce, I hoped to move on, but the aftermath was far from over. The affair between Jack, Grace, and me became gossip among our friends, especially since we all went to the same university. Shockingly, some rumors suggested I hid my infertility and tricked Jack into marrying me. Some friends even sympathized with Jack and Grace, which felt awful. The situation got worse at work because Lee, Grace's father, was my company's president. Grace portrayed herself as a victim, spreading lies about me hiding my infertility and demanding alimony while she was pregnant. Despite trying to ignore it, I faced backlash at work. My bosses favored Grace because of her influential family, and I was sidelined from important projects. Eventually, I felt forced to resign. While job hunting, another company recognized my skills and offered me a position. Here, I thrived beyond expectations. My new boss valued me for my abilities, unlike my previous workplace, which favored nepotism. I found myself drawn to this boss, who turned out to be my current husband, David. David was my rock during the tough times after my breakup with Jack. We spent a lot of time together, talking about everything from work to personal matters, and our bond grew into love. When David proposed, I was thrilled, but I was also scared of facing infertility again. I confessed this fear to him, and he reassured me, saying that he loved me no matter what and that having children wasn't the most important thing to him. Feeling truly happy and loved, I decided to marry David. Shortly after our wedding, we were blessed with our first child, Max, followed by our daughter, Aha. Despite the challenges of parenting, we were content and happy every day. Years later, at a friend's wedding, I unexpectedly saw my ex-husband for the first time in 15 years. I was startled to see him there, but then I remembered that the bride and groom were also our university friends, so it wasn't surprising that he was there too. I tried to ignore him as I walked by, but he called out to me loudly, catching my attention. "Hey, what's up?" Jack said loudly, possibly drunk, as he spoke to me. "Surprised to see you here, it's been a while. Looks like you've put on some weight, huh?" he added, spraying a bit as he talked. I silently rolled my eyes at his sarcastic comment. Then Jack called over his family, including Grace and her son. Grace laughed when she saw me and joked, "Wow, it's been ages. Have you been stress eating? You've gained some weight, huh? Life's been a roller coaster, hasn't it? And still no luck with having kids, right? Tough luck, huh?" Their rude comments left me speechless with shock. Then I noticed Grace's son blushing and looking down with embarrassment. He was quite handsome. I realized I hadn't introduced him yet. "This is my son," Grace proudly announced. "He's cute, right? Takes after me. And he's not just good looking, he's really smart too, a little genius. Looks like we're the only ones happy here, huh?" Jack and Grace laughed, proudly showing off their son. But I noticed something off about their son's expression. He seemed uncomfortable with his parents' behavior, growing increasingly dissatisfied with their mocking attitude. He must be a kind-hearted child, I thought to myself. But I didn't have time for them. Just as I was about to leave, Jack grabbed my arm tightly. "You divorced me because of infertility, yet you took money from us," he said, still holding on to a grudge from 15 years ago. Then Grace chimed in, "Yeah, you're infertile and single. Why do you need money? Families like us with children need it more. Give us back double the money you took." Their selfishness stunned me. Suddenly, Jack's son spoke up, pointing out, "Single means unmarried, right? But she's wearing a wedding ring on her left hand." Everyone's attention turned to my left hand, where I wore a wedding ring. Jack and Grace stared in shock. "You're married?" they exclaimed loudly, causing a scene. Feeling embarrassed by the scene Jack and Grace caused, I was unsure what to do. Suddenly, my son Max and daughter Ava appeared, concerned about my lateness. Ava, always outspoken, was joined by Max, who rarely spoke up so boldly. "Mom, you're late, and you have kids?" Max asked, surprising me with his directness. "Yes, I do. Let me introduce them. This is my son Max and my daughter Ava." Jack and Grace were shocked to see the children of the woman they thought couldn't have kids. Grace looked closely at my son, and after a moment, they began to speak in a more mature tone, though their voices sounded strained. They seemed curious about Max's uniform. "He came straight from school with my husband, so he's still in his uniform. And yes, he goes to that famous private middle school," I explained. "Max worked hard and wanted to try for it, so we let him take the exam. He passed and has been attending since this year." Indeed, Max excelled academically and was enrolled in a prestigious local school. "No way, he can't be your son," my daughter exclaimed, joining the conversation. "She plans to take the same school's exam next year," I added proudly. "Yeah, and Max is amazing. He won a violin contest," Ava chimed in. "Violin? I thought I recognized him. He was on TV recently," Grace exclaimed. "Oh, you saw that?" "Yes, he's been getting quite a bit of media attention lately. He was coming back from violin practice today," I explained. Grace and my ex-husband were speechless. "You were supposed to be infertile. How could you have children like this?" Jack protested. "We're all happy now, and that's what matters. Let's not involve each other anymore," I said firmly, ready to leave with my kids. Just then, my husband David arrived. Jack's face went pale at the sight of him. "Is your husband by any chance the young Mr. Lopes who became the president of Resident last year?" Jack asked, recognizing David. Indeed, David was the president of a company that had ties with Grace's father's firm. I had switched jobs and met David there. Last year, he was appointed as the president of the company, recommended by the then president. "Ah, I'm Lopez," my husband introduced himself, confused by the tense atmosphere. Sensing the tension, Max explained, "We heard these people calling Mom infertile and fat, so Ava and I came to help her out." I realized they must have overheard my ex-husband and his wife insulting me earlier. My husband's expression hardened as he realized the situation. "I heard rumors, but I didn't expect a lack of decency," he said firmly. Jack started making excuses, trying to flatter my husband, while Grace protested. They began arguing, and their son, who had been silent, finally spoke up. "Let's stop this already. It's terrible how you're talking about this lady, calling her fat and infertile, and demanding money back. It's embarrassing for me," he said tearfully. "And what's this about an affair? Am I a child born from an affair? Am I an unwanted child?" he continued, his voice full of anguish. Jack and Grace became visibly unsettled. "Oh well, it's not like that." Grace tried to defend herself, but she couldn't ignore the stares from the other guests. Blushing deeply, she looked down in embarrassment. Though I couldn't forgive Jack and Grace, I admired their son for his sense of justice and kindness. Wanting to support him, I was about to speak, but my husband spoke up first. "Thank you for standing up for my wife and defending her from insults. You're a kind child," my husband said, patting the boy's head. With a smile, I decided to speak up too. "But maybe I am a bit chubby. However, that's not the point. Actually, I'm pregnant," I announced, gently stroking my belly. I was already pregnant with our third child. At that time, I was on maternity leave. Turning to the tear-filled eyes of the boy, I continued, Your mom also nurtured you in her belly with great care. You're not an unwanted child. Your mom and dad love you and are proud of you, right?" Looking at Jack and Grace, I waited for their response. The boy looked at them hopefully and asked, "Really?" Jack and Grace quickly nodded, assuring him, "Yes, yes. You're our pride. You're very important to us." Seeing the boy smile, I felt a sense of relief. "Let's get back to our seats for now." "It's a day of celebration," I suggested. Each family returned to their seats, and the chaotic scene came to an end. The wedding concluded successfully, and as we headed to the station, Grace and Jack approached us with their son, holding hands. Max and Ava had been protective of me, but my husband chuckled and calmed them down. Grace and Jack offered their apologies. "Sorry about everything. We truly regret our actions today." "Thank you for earlier," they said. It was the first apology I had received from them in 15 years. Perhaps having a child had changed them a bit. I just laughed and said, "Really? After all this time?" With that, I turned my back on them and began to walk away. Max offered to carry my bags, taking the one marked with maternity. Ava cheerfully dragged a coat over my shoulders. Despite their young age, they were looking out for me during my pregnancy. "All right, tonight's dinner will be Dad's homemade hamburgers, Max and Ava's favorite." "Thank you." I vowed to protect the smiles of my beloved family, leaving behind the pains of the past.
"Goodbye to buying cheap products from other companies," declared the president's wife, abruptly terminating the contract. This client was significant, and I felt a wave of concern, but then a brilliant idea struck me. "Understood, we will never deliver to you again," I replied confidently, signing the contract she had presented. Later, the president's wife returned to our company, her face ashen with shock. "I'm Mia, 37 years old, and I manage the company my grandfather founded. It's a stable business with a loyal clientele. To safeguard this company and its employees, I continually study economics and development. Our main focus is manufacturing precision mechanical equipment. Some employees have been with us since my grandfather's time, possessing knowledge that surpasses mine. I frequently visit the site to learn from them firsthand. My dedication has earned their respect, and despite my age, I have gained their trust. I approach client relationships with earnestness and passion, which has helped maintain the steady performance of the company my grandfather entrusted to me. However, there's always room for improvement. I need to keep learning to further earn their recognition and ensure the company's continued success." Then, a remarkable event unfolded within the company. It began with the arrival of the wife of a crucial client's president. She expressed astonishment, claiming her husband had a long-standing association with our company, yet she had never realized it was under the direction of someone she deemed immature. The disdainful gaze fixed upon me belonged to none other than the president's wife, representing a prominent company that had maintained a contract with us since my grandfather's era. Mrs. Brown disclosed that the day marked the annual year-end celebration hosted by her husband. This wasn't just any ordinary gathering, but a grand affair assembling all their business affiliates. It was an event deeply ingrained in their calendar, and this year, I had received an invitation and opted to attend, following my grandfather's guidance. As I socialized and exchanged pleasantries with various attendees, Mrs. Brown emerged, indicating she was representing her husband, the president. While Mrs. Brown typically remained aloof from managerial affairs, this encounter marked my first introduction to her. After exchanging pleasantries, making introductions, and expressing gratitude for the consistent special treatment we had received, Mrs. Brown delivered an unexpected statement. "I don't know what methods you employ to influence my husband, but beware, you may face dire consequences," Mrs. Brown warned. In that moment, her words left me bewildered, their true meaning escaping me. As I stood there, taken aback, Mrs. Brown smoothly transitioned to converse with another company president. Her demeanor shifted significantly, radiating warmth and charm, leaving me perplexed about her abrupt animosity towards me. Feeling unsettled, the year-end party eventually drew to a close. Opting not to attend the after-party, I instead decided to seek answers from my parents. My parents and grandparents reside together in our family home, and I often turn to them for guidance. Upon my late arrival, I offered apologies, but my parents greeted me warmly, informing me that my grandfather was still awake. Eager for insight, I sought out my grandfather to inquire about Mrs. Brown's behavior and reputation. To my surprise, my grandfather painted Mrs. Brown as an exemplary figure, a devoted spouse who selflessly supported her husband and their son. The more I learned, the deeper my confusion about Mrs. Brown's sudden hostility grew. A few days post the after-party, Mrs. Brown made an unexpected visit to my company, catching my employees and secretary off guard. Since I wasn't present, she had to wait, which evidently did not sit well with her. "I'm the spouse of the president of one of this company's major clients. Is this how you treat valued guests? It's no wonder this company appears disorganized with a young woman at its helm," she remarked. From my perspective, Mrs. Brown's unannounced visit was the unreasonable action, but unfortunately, I wasn't there to voice my opinion. Instead, my secretary bore the brunt of Mrs. Brown's frustration. By the time I returned, Mrs. Brown had departed, leaving a message with my secretary that she intended to return to offer a proper apology. Consequently, I scheduled a meeting with her for a later date. Upon entering the president's office, I anticipated encountering the president himself, only to be surprised by Mrs. Brown occupying the president's chair, exuding an air of superiority. I initiated the conversation by extending my apologies for my absence during her previous visit and expressed my willingness to address any concerns she had. What ensued was a revelation from Mrs. Brown that caught me off guard. Goodbye to relying on inferior products from other suppliers. For a moment, I found myself rendered speechless, likely wearing an expression of profound astonishment. Mrs. Brown's scowl deepened upon seeing my reaction. "A business under the management of someone as immature as you cannot be trusted. Moreover, your pricing is exorbitant for the quality you deliver. I'm terminating our contract to cut costs," she declared. Her accusations felt baseless, prompting a vehement rebuttal from me. I adamantly denied any overcharging and passionately defended the superior quality of our products, emphasizing their long-standing endorsement by the president. However, Mrs. Brown appeared unwilling to entertain my explanations. "The conceitedness of someone as immature as you is repulsive," she scoffed. When I inquired whether the president was aware of this decision, Mrs. Brown revealed that she was currently acting as the president, wielding full authority over the company. She explained that the president had been urgently summoned abroad to address issues in their production line, leaving her as the vice president to assume the role of acting president. It was then that I realized the reason behind the president's absence at the year-end party. "Tomorrow, I'll bring all the necessary documents to terminate our contract to your company. Make sure you're there. I won't tolerate even a second's delay," Mrs. Brown asserted firmly. When I pressed Mrs. Brown for the specific time of her arrival, she begrudgingly disclosed it. Leaving her company that day, I felt as though I was being forcibly shown the door. Their business was pivotal for us. Without them, meeting payroll could become a challenge. Gripped by a sense of urgency, I scrambled to devise strategies to prevent the impending contract termination. The following day, Mrs. Brown arrived promptly at my office. She placed the documents on my desk with a stern demeanor, urging me to sign without delay. "Please allow me to discuss this with the president," I implored. "There's no time for that. Both my husband and I lead busy lives. Unlike your modest operation, we are a major corporation. You should comprehend this, being a fellow business owner," Mrs. Brown retorted dismissively. I seethed with anger at Mrs. Brown's patronizing tone. Her unilateral decision to terminate the contract was utterly unreasonable. Moreover, considering our long-standing business relationship, one would expect her, as a business owner, to grasp the magnitude of betrayal inherent in her actions. Yet there was no hint of remorse from Mrs. Brown. Frustrated by her arrogance, I resolved to enact the countermeasure I had pondered throughout the night as a last resort. I posed the question to Mrs. Brown with genuine concern, "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Mrs. Brown responded with a derisive laugh, mocking my inquiry. Observing her reaction, I couldn't help but smile. "Understood, we will cease all deliveries to your company," I affirmed. Briefly, Mrs. Brown displayed a flicker of hesitation at my swift acquiescence, but as soon as she witnessed me affixing my signature to the contract, she wore a triumphant smile, evidently satisfied. "Thank you. Our business dealings are now officially concluded," she declared. With an air of self-satisfaction, Mrs. Brown departed. As she exited, both my secretary and I bowed respectfully, concealing our inner amusement. I couldn't help but think that she should have scrutinized the documents more carefully. Once she was out of sight, I promptly composed a concise email to Mrs. Brown's husband, appreciation for all past collaborations. I surmised that this alone would likely suffice for the president to discern the situation. Shortly thereafter, a call was received at my company. Good day, I apologize for the sudden call. I was taken aback by your email. Could you shed some light on the situation? I'd appreciate a discussion if possible, perhaps in person. To the president's request, I casually assented. Certainly, that can be arranged. A week later, the president arrived at my office, visibly uneasy. Accompanying him was Mrs. Brown, her expression reflecting evident displeasure. After formal greetings and light conversation, the president wasted no time inquiring about the contents of my email. Guiding him to a comfortable spot, I offered coffee before settling across from him, preparing to relay the tale, anticipating it to be rather lengthy. Before delving into the sequence of events, I explained, Mrs. Brown abruptly terminated our contract, and I felt it appropriate to express gratitude to the president for years of support before bidding farewell. As I candidly voiced my frustration, the president's complexion turned pale, and he swiftly extended a heartfelt apology. Mrs. Brown, visibly surprised, accompanied him. With sweat glistening on his brow, the president apologized earnestly. Mrs. Brown, unsettled by his demeanor, knelt beside him, her voice sharp as she rebuked him. What are you doing, apologizing to this inexperienced girl? Cease this immediately. Disregarding Mrs. Brown's objections, the president compelled her to offer an apology. Then, stealing a glance at his wife, he implored me, please reconsider terminating the contract. Our company depends heavily on yours. Losing your partnership would be a significant blow to us. He continued to apologize profusely. Mrs. Brown, glaring at her husband, directed her dissatisfaction towards me. Even without this small company, our business won't suffer. I've already secured contracts with overseas firms to fill the gap. What's the issue? Maintaining her assertive stance, Mrs. Brown's attitude left me sighing in frustration. Witnessing my reaction, the president was taken aback, then erupted into fury, scolding Mrs. Brown vehemently. You're clueless. How could you act without considering the consequences? We've maintained a loyal relationship with this company for 40 years. Do you grasp the significance of that? Mocking the president's sentiment, Mrs. Brown fired back, so what? I'm not sentimental about old ties. Ending our association with this company will cut costs and enable us to lower our prices, gaining an edge over competitors. It's beneficial. The president's frustration escalated upon hearing Mrs. Brown's retort. Allowing you to act as president was a mistake, he bellowed, his regret palpable as Mrs. Brown smirked triumphantly in response. In the midst of their confrontation, Mrs. Brown's phone interrupted with a persistent ring. I'm occupied at the moment, she snapped irritably into the phone. However, her demeanor swiftly shifted from annoyance to panic and bewilderment. Hold on, what's happening? With a sense of anticipation, I waited until Mrs. Brown concluded the call before inquiring, is everything all right? Mrs. Brown, visibly overwhelmed, began to articulate her distress. The overseas company we relied upon has encountered a 3-week delay, and the products received are of subpar quality. Unable to suppress a mocking laugh, I replied, such setbacks are unsurprising. Our precision mechanical equipment possesses unique attributes that other companies simply cannot replicate. What do you mean? She demanded, her tone edged with curiosity. It's the craftsmanship, I asserted firmly, meeting Mrs. Brown's gaze with unwavering resolve. Though she appeared perplexed, I seized the moment to elucidate the profound significance of our company's refined technology and skilled craftsmanship. I emphasize how our products encompass unique techniques unattainable elsewhere, reliant on the expertise of our master craftsmen. As my confidence radiated, Mrs. Brown's expression shifted from defiance to frustration and resignation. With a triumphant air, I held my ground, meeting her defeated countenance with a sense of vindication. Having been vehemently vocal throughout our exchange, Mrs. Brown now seemed rendered speechless, her demeanor subdued. Curious about her motives, I pressed Mrs. Brown for an explanation. With defiant candor, she began to unravel her intentions, revealing a desire to secure her son's future by positioning him as the heir to the company. However, her husband's opposition led her to devise a plan, assuming the role of president temporarily to pave the way for her son's ascension. When an overseas issue emerged, Mrs. Brown saw an opportunity to sever ties with long-standing partners and forge new alliances, with her ultimate goal being to consolidate support for her son's succession. Unfortunately for her, my company stood as an obstacle to her scheme. She had sought alternative suppliers but faced setbacks until now. Mrs. Brown's glare bored into the president, who sighed heavily, clearly exasperated. You truly don't grasp the situation. Our son has no interest in inheriting this company. Mrs. Brown's shock was palpable as the president proceeded to disclose their son's true aspirations. Our son has expressed a passion for agriculture, not business. He set his sights on attending agricultural college, not pursuing economics. That's why I kept it concealed, considering my brother's interest in assuming management. It can't be, Mrs. Brown murmured, disbelief etched on her face. It is. Take a look at this, the president urged, displaying his mobile phone. A message from their son, brimming with excitement about his acceptance into agricultural college, accompanied by a snapshot presumably taken on campus, was presented. Witnessing the evidence, Mrs. Brown's resolve faltered, and she sank to the floor in defeat. Turning to me with a plea tinged with desperation, the president implored, Please, I'll devote myself to making amends for this misstep. Can we reopen negotiations on the contract? I reached out to the president, offering my hand. If Mrs. Brown is willing to step back from management, we can proceed as though the contract termination never occurred. Relief flooded the president's expression, yet Mrs. Brown, her bitterness evident, fixed a steely gaze on me, adamantly insisting that the termination documents remained valid. I refused to retract the contract termination. It was all for the sake of my son assuming the presidency. Mrs. Brown's stubbornness was palpable. With a heavy sigh, I suggested she review the contract documents once more. Motioning to my secretary, I requested the copy provided by Mrs. Brown. Please observe the signature area. I directed her attention to a spot outside the designated section where my signature was positioned. Mrs. Brown, taken aback, hesitated. Doesn't this render the contract termination invalid? Admittedly, it was an oversight on my part to sign in the wrong place. However, Mrs. Brown, you overlooked it as well, leaving us on equal footing, wouldn't you agree? Mrs. Brown remained silent, contemplating the revelation. Seizing the opportunity, I offered a piece of advice. One who neglects thorough examination of contract documents may not be suited for a managerial role. With those words, the president swiftly retrieved the discarded document from the floor, scrutinizing its contents before breaking into a broad smile. Thank you so much, he expressed repeatedly. As the president extended his gratitude, Mrs. Brown, now seated beside him, wore an expression tinged with regret. Later, I found solace in retaining the crucial contract and earned praise from my grandfather for safeguarding the future of our employees. However, it came to light that Mrs. Brown had similarly severed ties with other companies, prompting the president to extend apologies far and wide. I aided him in explaining the situation to these companies, offering assistance where necessary. Fortunately, they were receptive, aiding in the recovery of the president's company. As a consequence of the turmoil, Mrs. Brown was ousted from the management team, held responsible for nearly jeopardizing the company, and faced with the prospect of divorce from the president. Despite her resistance, the president, feeling betrayed, showed her no leniency. Their son ultimately found liberation from his mother's influence, pursuing his agricultural studies with unwavering conviction. For my company, the outcome was transformative. Not only did we garner favor with a major corporation, but our reputation flourished, leading to a surge in new contracts. Our sales soared, surpassing even my grandfather's achievements, and our employees rallied behind us more fervently than ever. As I continue to lead, I remain vigilant, committed to learning and evolving, much like the president before me. Hi, I'm Laura, a 35-year-old single mom navigating this hectic life with my incredible 12-year-old daughter, Emily. We've got a charming little place in the suburbs. It might not be much, but it's our home. I'm working tirelessly as a nurse, juggling long shifts to ensure we have food on the table and a roof over our heads. Emily is truly something special, sharp as a tack and brimming with creativity. Her curly hair is like a fairy tale mane, and she loves using it to showcase her unique style. Then there's Gertrude, my ex-mother-in-law, a real thorn in my side. At 68, she's a cranky widow living uncomfortably close. While I do value her help with Emily after school, her presence can be a bit overwhelming. Laura, dear, don't you think Emily's hair is a bit unruly? Gertrude's voice cuts through my morning rush. I take a deep breath and respond, it's just hair, Gertrude. Emily likes it that way. In my day, young ladies knew how to present themselves properly. Gertrude huffs. I bite my tongue, reminding myself that I should be grateful for any childcare help. Thank goodness for Sarah, my best friend and fellow nurse. She's my anchor, always ready to listen or step in with Emily when Gertrude gets particularly unbearable. One day, over coffee, Sarah says, "Girl, I don't know how you put up with that old bat. You've got the patience of a saint." I chuckle and reply, "Believe me, it's wearing pretty thin." Then there's Michael, my neighbor. He's a real gem, always offering to help with odd jobs around the house. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't noticed the way he looks at me. But after the whole mess with Emily's dad, I'm not quite ready to dive back into the dating scene. "Hey Laura, need a hand with that?" Michael calls out as I'm struggling with some boxes in the driveway. "Thanks, Michael. You're a lifesaver," I reply, trying not to focus on how his shirt fits snugly over his arms as he lifts the heavy box. But hey, not everything is bad. There are great neighbors and charming handymen. The real drama is the ongoing clash between Gertrude and me over how to raise Emily. One night at dinner, Gertrude scolds, "Emily, sit up straight. A lady doesn't slouch." I notice Emily's shoulders slump even further. "Mom, do I have to listen to her?" Emily asks. "Just do your best, sweetie," I reply, casting a warning glance at Gertrude. We all have different views on what's important. Different views indeed, Gertrude grumbles. "If you just listened to me, Laura, that child wouldn't be so unruly." I tighten my grip under the table. Emily isn't unruly, she's just expressing herself. I won't squash that. Mark my words, Laura, without proper discipline, that girl will end up in trouble. Watching Emily retreat to her room, her wild curls bouncing with each step, I can't help but worry about how long I can maintain this fragile balance. I have a sinking feeling that when it breaks, it won't be pretty. After an exhausting extra shift at the hospital, all I wanted was to hold my little girl and collapse into bed. But as soon as I walked through the door, a sense of dread washed over me. "Emily, sweetie, I'm home," I called out. The silence that greeted me was unsettling. I found her curled up in bed, sobbing. When she looked up, my heart nearly stopped. My beautiful girl's curls were gone, her head shaved clean. "Mom," Emily cried, throwing herself into my arms. "Grandma," while I was sleeping. I held her tightly, trying to comfort her as my mind raced. "Shush, sweetheart, it's going to be okay. We'll fix this." But inside, I was furious. How could that woman do this to my child? I stormed into the living room where Gertrude sat with an unsettling calm. "What on earth did you do?" I demanded. Gertrude remained unfazed. "I did what was necessary. That child was becoming far too vain and disobedient." "Vain? Disobedient? She's just a 12-year-old girl." "Exactly, and it's about time she learned some discipline. In my day, this isn't your call to make." I cut her off. "What you did is assault. I'm calling the police." Gertrude scoffed. "Don't be so dramatic, Laura. I've tolerated your lenient approach long enough. Someone had to step in before Emily ended up a delinquent like her father. That's when I lost my temper. Get out of my house now." Gladly, Gertrude sneered. "But remember, you'll regret ignoring my advice. That girl needs discipline. The only thing she needs is for you to stay far away from her." As Gertrude gathered her things, the reality of the situation hit me hard. I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face. Just then, there was a knock at the door. It was Michael, looking worried and concerned. "Laura, is everything all right?" I heard shouting. Michael took one look at my tear-streaked face and knew something was terribly wrong. "What happened?" he asked, his concern growing as I struggled to find my voice. Instead, I just gestured towards Emily's room. Michael's eyes widened with shock as he saw her. "Oh my God, who did this?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Gertrude," I managed to choke out. Michael's expression hardened. "That's it. I'm calling the police." "No," Emily cried. "I don't want anyone to see me like this." I held her tightly. "It's okay, sweetie. We won't do anything you're not comfortable with." Michael knelt beside us, his concern evident. "Is there anything I can do?" Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Sarah. "Laura, what's going on? I saw your missed call and you sounded really upset in your voicemail." Between sobs, I tried to explain. "That awful woman." Sarah's voice was firm. "I'm coming over right now." Within minutes, Sarah burst through the door, arms loaded with bags. "All right, I've got hats, scarves, and some cute pixie cut photos for inspiration. We'll make this right." Emily managed a faint smile as Sarah began working her magic, trying to salvage what was left of her hair. I filled Michael in on the entire ordeal with Gertrude. "I can't believe I let her anywhere near Emily," I said, a wave of self-loathing washing over me. Michael squeezed my hand reassuringly. "This isn't your fault, Laura. You were just trying to do your best for your daughter." Sarah nodded in agreement. "Michael's right. The only person to blame here is that old bat." "Gertrude." I nodded, but the guilt still gnawed at me. How could I have been so blind? As the night dragged on, Emily finally fell into an exhausted sleep. Sarah and Michael insisted on staying, setting up camp in the living room. Alone in bed, staring at the ceiling, I made a vow. Gertrude would face consequences for what she had done. I was determined to see justice served. My daughter deserved nothing less. The next few days were a blur of tears, anger, and sleepless nights. Emily wouldn't leave her room, let alone go to school. I called in sick, knowing she needed me more than ever. "Sweetie, you can't hide forever," I said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. "I look like a freak, Mom," Emily sobbed. "Everyone's going to laugh at me." My heart broke all over again. "No, baby, you're beautiful just the way you are. We'll get through this together." Our first stop was the police station, but it turned out to be a major disappointment. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but since there was no physical harm, this is considered a civil matter," the officer said, clearly uninterested. "No physical harm," I exploded. "Look at what's happened to my daughter." But it seemed rules were rules, so the next step was consulting a lawyer. "We can certainly pursue charges for emotional abuse and file for damages," the lawyer explained. "But be warned, it won't be easy." I was determined, undeterred by the challenges. Sarah was a lifeline throughout it all, helping me document everything, photos, timelines, you name it. "We're going to hold that old witch accountable," Sarah vowed as we worked. Meanwhile, Michael was working his own magic. "I've got a friend who specializes in family law," he said. "He's a top-notch lawyer and is willing to take your case pro bono." I could have kissed Michael right then and there, but there was no time for that. Things were about to get even messier. It began with whispers at the grocery store and sidelong glances from neighbors. Soon, calls from distant relatives started pouring in. "Laura, is it true you've been neglecting Emily?" my cousin asked. That's when it hit me. Gertrude was on the offensive, spreading lies that I was an unfit mother. Furious, I vented to Sarah and Michael. "That witch is trying to turn everyone against me." But Gertrude had underestimated me. I began digging, reaching out to old babysitters, family friends, anyone who had ever interacted with Emily. The stories that emerged made my blood run cold. One night, Emily confessed through tears. "Grandma said if I told you, she'd send me away to boarding school. She used to lock me in the closet when I misbehaved." I pulled her close, a mix of rage and guilt churning inside me. How had I missed this? "It's not your fault, sweetheart," I said softly, my voice trembling. I reassured her. "I promise you, Grandma will never hurt you again." With Sarah and Michael's help, we devised a plan. We set up hidden cameras around the house and taught Emily how to safely gather evidence if Gertrude tried to contact her. "Remember, kiddo," Michael said, demonstrating how to use the voice recorder on her phone. "If Grandma calls or shows up, press this button immediately." Emily nodded, her expression resolute. "I won't let you down, Mom." "You could never let me down, sweetheart," I said, hugging her tightly. "We're in this together." As we completed our preparations, a steely resolve took hold of me. Gertrude thought she could bully and manipulate her way to victory, but she had no idea what was coming. This mama bear was ready to fight, and I wasn't about to back down. "All right, team," I said, turning to Sarah and Michael. "Let's take this witch down." The trap was set. Now we just had to wait for Gertrude to make her move. And when she did, we'd be ready. The day of the trial arrived, and I felt a wave of nausea. Emily squeezed my hand as we stepped into the courtroom. "You've got this, Mom," she whispered, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Our lawyer presented the mountain of evidence we had gathered. The hidden camera footage was particularly damning, capturing Gertrude storming into our home and hurling threats at Emily. "You ungrateful little brat." Gertrude's voice cut through the courtroom. "I'll teach you to disobey me." I saw the judge's expression darken, but that was just the beginning. One by one, witnesses took the stand. Former babysitters, family friends, even Emily's old piano teacher. Each had a story to share about Gertrude's cruelty. She told me if I didn't make Emily practice for 3 hours a day, she'd have me fired, the piano teacher testified. But the most powerful moment came with Emily's own testimony. My brave girl took the stand, her voice trembling but resolute. Grandma said if I ever told Mom what she did, she'd make sure it was taken away. Emily said. I was overwhelmed with fear and sorrow, unable to hold back my tears. How had I missed this? Gertrude's lawyer attempted to portray her as a concerned grandmother, but the damage was done. The truth had come to light. When the judge announced his decision, I felt a wave of relief so intense I almost collapsed. The court grants a permanent restraining order against the defendant, he declared. Additionally, significant damages are awarded for the plaintiff's therapy and emotional distress. We had won. Gertrude was out of our lives for good. As we left the courtroom, Gertrude approached us, tears in her eyes. Laura, Emily, I'm so sorry, she said, her voice trembling. I cut her off sharply. Save it, Gertrude. You're dead to us. As we walked away from the courtroom, I felt a heavy burden lift from my shoulders. The following months were challenging, but we navigated them together. Emily began therapy and slowly started to come out of her shell. One evening, as we gathered around the dinner table with Sarah and Michael, Emily made a heartfelt announcement. I want to donate the money from the lawsuit, she said, to help other kids who've been through similar things. I couldn't have been prouder. As for Michael and me, he became a permanent part of our lives. His unwavering support throughout everything meant the world to us. The real turning point came about 6 months after the trial. Emily and I were at the hair salon, and for the first time since the incident, she was excited about her hair. What do you think about adding purple streaks, Mom? She asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I grinned. I think purple streaks sound fantastic, sweetheart. As the stylist worked her magic, I caught Emily's reflection in the mirror. For the first time in months, she was genuinely smiling. You know what, Mom? She said. I think we're going to be okay. I squeezed her hand gently. Yes, baby, we're going to be just fine. Watching my daughter with her vibrant new hairstyle, a symbol of her strength and resilience, I knew we had emerged stronger than ever. Gertrude had tried to break us, but all she did was make us unbreakable. As we left the salon, heads held high, a realization struck me. Sometimes, the best way to reclaim your life isn't about seeking revenge but about thriving on your own terms. And that's precisely what we plan to do. If you were in Laura's position, would you ever consider forgiving Gertrude for her actions, or do you believe that some betrayals are truly unforgivable? Hi, I'm Sarah. Before we jump into the story, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this. I'm 28, happily married to the love of my life, Mark, and we're eagerly awaiting our first baby. Life's been pretty amazing so far. We've got this charming little house in the suburbs, stable jobs, and now we're diving into all things baby. Decorating the nursery, shopping for adorable clothes, you name it. My mother-in-law, Karen, seemed great at first. She dropped by with casseroles and offered to help with the nursery, but there was something a bit off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but her smile always seemed a bit forced when she looked at me. Oh, Sarah, sweetheart, let me take care of that, Karen would say, swooping in to grab the paint roller from my hand. We wouldn't want you to overexert yourself, now would we? I'd force a smile and respond, thanks, Karen. I'm pregnant, not helpless, but I appreciate it. Her laugh, a high-pitched cackle, always grated on my nerves. Oh, you're so amusing, dear. Mark, don't you think she's just hilarious? Mark, seemingly unaware of the underlying tension, would shrug. Mom's just trying to help, babe. As time went on, Karen became a constant presence in our home. She'd show up unannounced, rearrange our furniture, and offer unsolicited critiques on my cooking. Oh, is that how you're preparing the pasta? Well, I guess that's one method, Karen commented with a hint of condescension. I tried to bring it up with Mark, but he dismissed my concerns. She's just excited about the baby, Sarah. Give her a break. But things started to take a strange turn. I'd find my prenatal vitamins rearranged on different shelves, and my hospital bag would be unpacked and repacked. One time, I could have sworn I saw Karen going through my phone while I was napping. Karen, have you been moving my things? I asked, struggling to stay calm. She blinked with feigned innocence. Me? Oh, no, dear. Must be pregnancy brain. It'll clear up soon. I wanted to scream, but instead, I forced a nod and retreated to the bedroom. Maybe it was being paranoid. Maybe it was just hormones, but deep down, I sensed something was off. Then it happened. I woke in the middle of the night, a sharp pain slicing through my belly. Mark, it's time. Everything went hazy. Mark frantically searching for the car keys, me trying to breathe through the contractions, and somehow Karen was there too, fussing over my hospital bag. Don't worry, dear, she said as we hurried to the car. I'll handle everything. We stormed into the hospital like a whirlwind, me struggling to breathe, Mark looking like he might faint, and Karen flitting around like an uncatchable mosquito. I need a room, now, I shouted, gripping the reception desk. This baby's on the way. The nurses swiftly escorted me to the delivery room, with Mark and Karen trailing close behind. Just as I was getting settled, a nurse named Jessica walked in. She had a soothing presence that immediately put me at ease. Hi, Sarah. I'm Jessica, and I'll be looking after you today. Let's get you as comfortable as we can, okay? I nodded, grateful for Jessica's calming presence. But then Karen jumped in. Oh, I used to be a nurse years ago. Maybe I can help out. Jessica glanced at Karen with a hint of skepticism but remained polite. That's very kind of you, ma'am, but we've got it all under control. Karen persisted. Oh, but I insist. Sarah's like a daughter to me. I wanted to shout. No, she's not. But another contraction hit, leaving me with nothing but a groan. Hours dragged on, and the pain intensified. Mark was doing his best, but he looked pale and queasy. You're doing great, honey, he said, his voice trembling. Shut up, Mark, I snapped. This is your fault. Karen floated over with a syrupy sweet tone. Now, dear, don't be too hard on Mark. Let me adjust your pillow for you. As she leaned in, the scent of her perfume made me feel suddenly nauseous. Karen, could you please give me a bit of space? She looked wounded, but Jessica stepped in. Let's give Sarah some room. Mark, why don't you fetch some ice chips? As Mark left, Jessica took my vitals. How are you holding up, Sarah? Like I'm being torn apart, I groaned. Is this supposed to be normal? Jessica gently patted my hand. Every labor is unique, but you're doing really well. I'll be back in a few minutes to check on you, okay? As soon as Jessica left, Karen was back at my side. Oh, sweetheart, you look so thirsty. Let me adjust your IV. I was too drained to protest. I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I opened them, Karen was fiddling with something near my bed. What are you doing? I slurred, feeling uneasy. Just making sure you're comfortable, dear, Karen said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. My head started spinning, and the room began to blur. Something was terribly wrong. I tried to call out, but my tongue felt leaden in my mouth. Mark, I barely managed to whisper. Karen's face loomed over me, her eyes chillingly indifferent. Dear, just relax. Panic surged as I realized I couldn't move. The monitor began to beep wildly. Where was everyone? Where was Jessica? Just then, Jessica burst into the room, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. What's going on here? Karen stepped back, feigning innocence. I don't know what happened. She just started acting oddly. Jessica quickly moved to my side, checking the monitors. Sarah, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me. I tried with everything I had, but I couldn't move. The last thing I heard was Jessica shouting, Code Blue, we need a crash cart in here now. Then everything went dark. What about my baby? That was my final thought before I lost consciousness, feeling betrayed by the one person who should have been there to protect me. I came to feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. The room was spinning, and though I could hear voices, they sounded distant. I tried to open my eyes, but they felt as if they were glued shut. She's coming around. Sarah, can you hear me? Jessica's voice reached me through the haze. I managed to croak out a faint, yes. Thank God, I heard Mark say, his voice trembling. Sarah, you scared us half to death. With great effort, I finally managed to open my eyes. The room was filled with people. Mark, looking like he'd aged 10 years, Jessica checking my vitals, and a couple of unfamiliar doctors. In the corner, Karen stood, looking uncomfortably nervous. What happened? I mumbled. Jessica leaned in, her expression serious. You had a severe reaction to something in your system. We had to perform an emergency C-section. My heart raced. The baby? She's fine, Mark said quickly. She's in the NICU, but she's perfect. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Mark nodded, tears welling in his eyes. We have a daughter, Sarah. I wanted to feel elated, but a nagging concern lingered. But what about me? Jessica exchanged a glance with one of the doctors. We're still investigating. Your blood work revealed dangerously high levels of medication that shouldn't have been in your system. Suddenly, everything came rushing back. Karen by my bedside, adjusting my IV, the strange sensation I felt. I turned to Karen, who was now edging towards the door. It was you, I said, my voice firmer. You tampered with my IV? The room fell into stunned silence. Mark stared at his mother in disbelief. Mom? Karen put on a facade of innocence. I don't know what you're talking about, dear. You must be disoriented from the medication. But Jessica wasn't convinced. Actually, I saw you near Sarah's IV just before she collapsed. Care to explain that? Karen's expression grew cold. I was trying to help. You weren't doing your jobs properly by administering unauthorized medication. Jessica responded sharply. That's not help. That's attempted murder. Mark looked pale, as if he might vomit. Mom, tell me this isn't true. Karen's mask of innocence shattered. She was going to take you away from me, Mark. This woman was going to ruin everything. Security, Jessica called out urgently. We need security in here immediately. As if on cue, 2 burly security guards burst into the room. Karen tried to escape, but they caught her just outside the door. Her screams echoed down the hall. You ungrateful brats. I was only trying to protect our family. I slumped back in the bed, utterly drained. Mark took my hand, his face a mix of shock and regret. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Save it, I said, my voice weary rather than angry. We'll sort that out later. I want to see our daughter. Jessica nodded. I'll arrange for her to be brought up from the NICU. But first, the police are here and will need your statement. As if on cue, 2 detectives entered the room, notepads in hand. Mrs. Johnson, I'm Detective Rivera, and this is my partner, Detective Chen. We'd like to ask you a few questions about what happened. I nodded, bracing myself. Go ahead. Detective Rivera cleared his throat. Can you walk us through what you remembered just before you lost consciousness? I detailed everything, Karen's odd behavior, her insistence on helping, and the moment I saw her tampering with my IV. Jessica added her observations, noting the suspicious timing of Karen's presence near my bed. Detective Chen scribbled notes rapidly. We'll need to review the security footage, Detective Rivera said. If what you're describing is accurate, Mrs. Johnson, your mother-in-law could face serious charges. Mark's voice trembled. I can't believe this, my own mother. I squeezed his hand reassuringly. We'll get through this, Mark, together. Just then, a nurse walked in, pushing a small plastic bassinet. Someone's here to meet her mommy, she said with a warm smile as she placed my daughter in my arms. All the pain and fear of the past few hours seemed to vanish. She was perfect, tiny fingers, a button nose, and a tuft of dark hair just like Mark's. Hi, little one, I whispered softly. I'm your mommy, and I promise I'll always protect you. The next few days in the hospital were a whirlwind of feedings, diaper changes, and a steady stream of doctors, nurses, and officers. Hope was a trooper through it all, sleeping peacefully while Mark and I tried to make sense of everything. How are you holding up, champ? Jessica asked, popping in during her rounds. I managed a weak smile. Better, thanks to you. I don't know how to repay you for saving our lives. She waved it off. Just doing my job. But I wouldn't mind being Hope's honorary Aunt D. Deal? I laughed, then grew serious. Any news on, Jessica nodded somberly. Karen's been formally charged. They found a stash of medication in her purse that matches what was in your system. Things aren't looking good for her. I could feel Mark stiffen beside me. He'd been silent since the incident, caught between relief that Hope and I were safe and guilt over his mother's actions. Babe, talk to me, I said, squeezing his hand. He sighed deeply. I can't believe she would do this. My own mother. I keep hoping there's some explanation. There isn't, I said firmly. She tried to kill me and our baby Mark. There's no coming back from that. He nodded, his expression resolute. Right, I've decided to cut all ties with her. No visits, no calls, nothing. You sure? I asked, surprised by his determination. Damn straight, he replied. You and Hope are my family now. That's all that matters. Just then, Detective Rivera walked in. Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Johnson, sorry to interrupt. We have an update on the case. We listened as he explained. The security footage was incriminating, clearly showing Karen tampering with my IV. They also discovered a journal in her home filled with rants about me, accusing me of stealing her son, and detailing plans to fix the situation. Jesus, Mark muttered, looking pale, attempted murder, among other charges. With the evidence we have, she'll likely be facing a lengthy prison sentence, Rivera continued. I nodded, a mix of relief and sadness washing over me. Thank you to Detective. After Detective Rivera left, Jessica returned with some papers. Good news, you're cleared for discharge. Ready to take this little munchkin home. As we packed up, the hospital administrator stopped by. Mrs. Johnson, on behalf of the hospital, I want to apologize for what happened. We're implementing new security measures to ensure nothing like this ever happens again. I appreciated the gesture, but my main focus was on getting out of there. Finally, we arrived home. As I gently placed Hope in her crib, Mark wrapped his arms around me from behind. We made it, he whispered. I leaned back into him. Yeah, we did. We stood there for a while, just watching our daughter sleep. It was serene, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at me. Mark, I said softly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. He turned to face me, his expression serious. Anything. I took a deep breath. Did you have any idea what your mom was capable of? His face fell. Sarah, I swear, if I had even the slightest hint, I would have kept her far away from us. I was completely blind, and I'm so sorry for that. I searched his eyes and saw only honesty and regret. Okay, I nodded. I believe you. He pulled me close, his voice soft but full of conviction. I love you, Sarah. You and Hope are my everything. We're going to get through this. Yeah, I said, feeling a new strength rising within me. We're going to be more than okay. So, here's a question for you. If you were in Mark's shoes, could you ever forgive your mother for something as unforgivable as trying to harm your wife and unborn child? Or would you cut ties completely like he did? It's a tough one, isn't it? Family betrayal like this doesn't come with easy answers. If this story had you hooked, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that dive deep into the complexities of life. Your support helps us keep bringing you content that resonates. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.
Elizabeth, the meal's ready. Thank you so much. I can't wait to dig in. And I heard you've made my favorite cheesecake today. Yes, it's all ready for you. Please help yourself. Thank you again for everything. My name is Elizabeth. I'm 30 years old and have been happily married to my husband Tom for 5 years. We get along well and enjoy each other's company, though we do it in our own unique way. One area where I'm particularly grateful is my relationship with my mother-in-law, Anna. While many people struggle with their in-laws, Anna and I have a good relationship. She lives alone now, as my father-in-law Simon passed away 3 years ago due to an illness. When Simon passed, Tom wanted to move in with Anna, but I felt that would put unnecessary strain on our relationship. Although I liked Anna, I knew that living together could be challenging for both of us. After discussing it with Tom, we decided it would be better to buy a house nearby instead. Tom agreed, and now we make it a point to visit Anna every weekend. She always greets us with a warm smile, and it seems to brighten her day. While our married life is generally smooth, there's one issue that concerns me: Tom's income. Both of us work full-time, but my salary is nearly double his. I work in it and recently received a promotion, which increased my salary even further. I feel that my pay is quite competitive compared to my colleagues. On the other hand, Tom works for a small company with less impressive performance, which results in a lower salary. Although Tom is frugal and doesn't spend much, I worry about our financial situation, especially when thinking about starting a family in the future. Tom works incredibly hard, making it difficult to discuss these concerns with him. To support our family finances better, I'm aiming for further promotions and additional responsibility at work. One evening, after finishing work earlier than usual, I arrived home and unlocked the door. I overheard Tom talking on the phone one evening. I usually avoid eavesdropping, but something about the conversation made me feel uneasy. I tried to be discreet as I listened in. From what I could gather, Tom was saying, "Don't worry, Elizabeth doesn't know. I've checked my savings, and there's quite a bit saved up now. Things are going well with the person you introduced me to, Mom. I just need to decide when to ask her for a divorce." My heart sank. Savings? Divorce? What was Tom talking about, and who was this person he mentioned? I could only guess that the person on the other end of the line was likely Anna. What were they planning? Feeling overwhelmed, I quietly left the house and went to a nearby cafe to collect my thoughts. The idea that Tom was contemplating a divorce was shocking. Was this person someone else he was involved with? And what did he mean about savings? Tom's income was modest. How could he have so much saved up? My mind was racing with questions. I ordered a coffee, hoping it would help me clear my thoughts. I took out a pen and paper to organize everything I'd heard and the possible scenarios. Gradually, a troubling hypothesis formed. Maybe Tom and Anna were plotting together to divorce me. They seemed to be stashing money away as hidden assets for Tom's new mistress. This was only a hunch, so I decided to hire a detective agency to investigate and confirm whether Tom was truly cheating on me. When I returned home from the cafe, Tom greeted me with his usual innocent smile, saying, "Welcome home." Despite his sometimes unreliable nature, I had always believed Tom to be a man of integrity. Discovering this hidden side of him was a shocking reminder of how deceptive appearances can be. A few weeks later, I received the investigation results from the detective agency. The evidence was overwhelming. Numerous photos showed Tom and his mistress entering a hotel together. It was clear that Tom was indeed unfaithful. I also uncovered the hidden savings Tom had been keeping from me. Finding proof was challenging. Tom's pay slips showed only a modest income, making it puzzling where he could have amassed such savings. Then a thought crossed my mind. I began to wonder if Tom had been showing me fake pay slips all along. Could he be forging them to deceive me? But then I thought, Tom isn't exactly the type to handle something as complex as forging documents. If anyone were behind this, it would have to be Anna. I needed to find concrete evidence, no matter what it took. As usual, Tom and I visited Anna over the weekend. However, her behavior was unusually off. "Elizabeth, would you cook for us today?" Anna asked, her tone markedly different from before. "You know, I always cook for you. I think you should try cooking on your own more often." Surprised by her sudden change in attitude, I agreed. Until now, Anna had always insisted on cooking herself, so it felt odd to be asked to do it. I prepared several dishes using ingredients from Anna's kitchen, but when I served them, Anna refused to eat any of it. "Anna, aren't you going to try the food?" I asked. To my shock, Anna tossed the dishes into the trash and said, "I can't eat this horrible food." She then pulled out some cup noodles and began preparing them. "This is much better." I glanced at Tom, but he seemed to be deliberately ignoring the scene. So that's what it was all about. Tom and Anna were colluding to harass me and force me to ask for a divorce. Anna's bullying escalated as she tried to make my life increasingly difficult. She assigned me nearly all the housework: cleaning the bathtub, scrubbing the toilet, tidying the storage room, and handling the laundry, while she lounged on the couch, watching TV. Whenever I tried to take a break, she would scold me harshly. Despite their efforts to push me towards divorce, I remained unfazed. In fact, Anna's attempts almost made me laugh. Anna's tactics became more extreme. One day, while I was cleaning the living room, she deliberately dropped a stack of dishes, shattering them on the floor. With a smirk, she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Elizabeth. Could you clean this up too?" She probably thought she'd finally pushed me to the edge, but I was actually impressed by her dedication to creating such chaos just to get under my skin. "Anna, are you hurt?" I asked, grabbing a brush to clean up the mess. Her irritation was palpable, and it was clear she was frustrated that her attempts to upset me had failed once again. Her frustration boiled over, and her remarks became increasingly petty. "You're so annoying," she complained. "You're always moving too efficiently. You should try to be more useless. Why are you so obedient?" Despite her continued efforts, I remained calm and focused, determined not to let her actions disrupt my peace of mind. I struggled to hold back my laughter, finding the situation almost amusing. However, Anna finally crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. One evening, as I was washing the dishes after dinner at Anna's house, she approached me and said, "You're using too much water," before slapping me on the cheek. Without thinking, I retaliated by slapping her back with my soapy hand. The impact made Anna fall to the ground. Tom rushed over, shouting, "What are you doing?" I chose to ignore him and left Anna's house. When I got home, Tom confronted me, visibly furious. "Hey, what were you thinking hitting my mom?"
She was the one who hit me first, I replied, trying to stay calm. Yeah, but you must have done something to provoke her. No, I said firmly. Anna just lost her temper on her own. I can't stay married to someone who's violent towards my mother. Oh, so you want a divorce? Yes, that's exactly what I want. Fine, Tom said, his tone cold. Let's get a divorce. I said this and pulled out the divorce papers from the drawer. What? You already have the divorce papers ready? Tom asked, surprised. I anticipated this was coming, I replied. But if we're discussing a divorce, I think Anna should be here too. What? Why? Tom protested. Mom has nothing to do with this. The reason for the divorce is that I hit Anna, right? I said. If we're going through with this, we should inform her properly. Reluctantly, Tom agreed and called Anna over. A little while later, Anna arrived, glaring at me while holding her red cheeks. Ignoring her look, I continued. So, you really want a divorce? Yes, I'm fine with that, Tom said, as he filled out his portion of the paperwork. He and Anna exchanged satisfied glances. Well, I guess that's settled then, Tom said with a grin. Not so fast, I interjected. We still need to discuss alimony and property division. Tom and Anna stared at me blankly. Alimony? For what? Tom asked, bewildered. For this, I said, placing the photos of Tom's affair, taken with the divorce papers, on the table. Tom and Anna's faces turned ashen. You're having an affair, aren't you? I pressed. No, it's not like that, Tom stammered. There's no denying it, I said firmly. The evidence of you entering a hotel room with your mistress speaks for itself. I'm confident I can claim alimony for this, I said, determined. No way, Tom retorted. And I know you've been secretly saving money, I added. Tom and Anna's eyes widened in surprise. You really thought you could get away with forging your pay slips? I pressed. What are you talking about? Tom asked, feigning ignorance. You're not capable of such deceit on your own. Anna, you were involved in this, weren't you? What? I would never do such a thing, Anna stammered. Well, if you want to be honest, that's fine, I said. But if you don't confess the truth now, I will sue you for fraud. Anna's anxiety was palpable, and she started sweating nervously. Don't accuse people without proof, she said, trying to stay composed. I'll get proof, I assured her. There are many ways to obtain it. I can request proof of income through the court, and my lawyer will get access to your withholding tax slips. That will confirm everything. Tom's face grew even paler. Finally, I delivered the clincher. If you continue to hide this, I'll sue you for all the damages. You'll end up paying more than your share of the property. Is that acceptable to you? Under the pressure, Tom confessed. He admitted that Anna had helped him falsify his pay slips and that he had been saving money in a personal account. When I asked why he had done this, his response was shocking. Tom revealed that he had always felt inferior because of my higher income. He had discussed this with Anna, who had advised him to divorce me because of it. Anna had suggested that Tom should let me cover more of his living expenses while he secretly saved money on the side. The plan was for Tom to accumulate enough savings to eventually divorce me. It seemed Anna had harbored a grudge because I had refused to live with her, and she was determined to bring me down with this scheme. Realizing their deception, I decided there was no reason to show them any kindness. I promptly hired a lawyer and demanded alimony from both Tom and his mistress. I also insisted on disclosing Tom's hidden savings and required a substantial portion of it. Tom agreed to pay me half the value of our house in exchange for my departure. Eventually, Tom depleted his savings, and his mistress, upset about the unexpected alimony payments, abandoned him. As a result of Anna's advice, the mother-son relationship between Tom and Anna deteriorated, and Tom stopped visiting Anna altogether. I also informed their neighbors about the scandal, leading to Anna becoming isolated and viewed negatively by the community. Additionally, I reported Tom's affair to his workplace. Since it's a small company with only a few employees, Tom faced significant embarrassment and was ostracized by his colleagues. Seeing them face the consequences of their actions was truly satisfying. Meanwhile, I embraced my new life as a single woman. I bought a luxurious tower condo and am enjoying the comfort and space. Recently, I also started a new relationship and am looking forward to enjoying my love life. Thank you for watching until the end. Please subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi there, I'm Sarah, a 28-year-old graphic designer with a love for all things creative and a little one on the way. Before I jump into my story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more of my wild adventures. Right now, I'm in my living room, surrounded by a vibrant mix of yellow and green decorations. My best friend, Emily, is balancing on a ladder, carefully hanging the final welcome baby banner. Emily, you're truly a lifesaver, I exclaim, gently patting my round belly. I honestly don't know how I'd manage this gender-neutral shower without you. She flashes a mischievous grin at me. That's what best friends are for, Mama. Besides, driving your mother-in-law crazy with all this yellow and green is just too much fun. I can't help but laugh. Oh, don't even remind me. Linda's been bombarding me with texts about the baby's gender. Honestly, if I get one more old wives' tale about how to figure out if it's a boy or girl, I might just lose it. Just then, my phone buzzes. Speak of the devil, Emily says, sliding down the ladder. Is that her again? I nod and show her the screen. Linda's asking if I'm craving salty or sweet foods, claiming it's a surefire way to predict the baby's gender. Emily rolls her eyes. Honestly, that woman could use a hobby. I couldn't agree more. I sigh, tossing my phone aside. Mark's doing his best to keep her at bay, but you know how relentless she can be. Just then, Mark walks in, looking slightly frazzled. Hey babe, the nursery's all set. My dad will be bringing over the last of the furniture later. Thanks, hun. How's your mom handling all of this? He runs a hand through his hair. She's definitely persistent, but I keep reminding her we're keeping it a surprise. Good luck with that, Emily chuckles. At that moment, the doorbell rings. It's my parents, Robert and Carol, arriving with arms full of gifts and snacks for the shower. Oh, sweetie, the place looks fantastic, Robert exclaims as he sets down the boxes, his face lighting up. Your mother was right. You've done an amazing job, kiddo. As we chat, Mark's phone starts ringing. He glances at the screen and sighs. It's Mom again. I better take this. He steps outside, and I can hear him trying to soothe Linda's latest concerns. Emily leans in and whispers, $10 as she's trying to get him to reveal the baby's gender. I shake my head. No bet. That's a sucker's game. As the day progresses, more friends and family arrive to help with the setup. The house is alive with energy, but I can't shake the feeling that Linda is up to something. Every time Mark's phone rings, I find myself tensing up. Later that evening, as Mark and I prepare for bed, I decide to bring it up. Hun, is your mom all right? She seems unusually fixated on this whole gender thing. Mark sighs and pulls me into a comforting embrace. You know how she is. She just wants to be part of everything. But don't worry, I've got it under control. I nod, trying to trust him, but as I drift off to sleep, my mind keeps racing with thoughts of what Linda might have planned for the baby shower the next day. On the morning of the baby shower, I wake up feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. As I'm getting ready, Mark walks in, looking unusually anxious. Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost, I ask. He runs a hand through his hair. I just got off the phone with my mom. She's acting strangely, more so than usual. She kept insisting she has a big surprise for us. I'm not liking the sound of it. I try to brush off my unease, but it lingers. As guests begin to arrive, I push my worries aside and focus on enjoying the party. This spread looks incredible, Sarah, my friend Rachel says, admiring the buffet. Thanks, Emily really went all out with the planning. Just then, Emily rushes over, visibly flustered. Sarah, we have a problem. The cake decorator messed up the order. The cake says it's a boy. What? No, this can't be happening. Don't worry, I've got a plan, Emily reassures me. We'll just scrape off the boy part and replace it with baby. Crisis averted. As we're sorting out the cake mess, the doorbell rings. Mark heads to answer it, and I hear his voice, filled with shock. Mom, what's going on? I turn to see Linda bursting in, followed by a small crowd of unfamiliar faces. She's holding a bunch of blue balloons, and a man in a white coat is with her. Surprise, darling, Linda exclaims brightly. I've brought the party to you. What's going on, Linda? I ask, trying to keep my voice steady. Well, since you two are so determined to keep the gender a secret, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Linda announces. Everyone, meet Dr. Thompson, our sonogram expert extraordinaire. The man in the white coat gives a hesitant wave. Mom, what are you doing? Mark hisses. I'm revealing the truth, dear. It's a boy, and I have proof. Linda pulls out a folder and starts brandishing it. I've got the latest sonogram pictures right here. Dr. Thompson will review them and confirm why I already know. I feel my face flush with a mix of anger and embarrassment. Linda, that's enough. This is our baby, and it's our decision. You have no right. Oh, pish posh. Linda interrupts. As the grandmother, I have every right to know. Emily steps in, trying to ease the tension. Hey, everyone, how about we switch gears and play some fun baby shower games? I've got a great one where we guess the baby's birthday. But Linda is relentless. She strides over to Dr. Thompson and thrusts the folder into his hands. Come on, doctor. Tell them what you see. The poor man looks alarmed. I'm not sure I should. Of course you should. Linda insists. I paid you well for this. The room gasps, and Mark's face turns pale. You did what? Linda's eyes widen in realization of her mistake. Oh, fine. Yes, I paid him. I've been trying to get the truth out of your obstetrician too, Sarah. I even offered her a very generous donation, but she wouldn't budge. I feel a wave of nausea. You tried to bribe my doctor. Linda, that's illegal. The room descends into chaos as Mark engages in a heated argument with his mother. How could you do this, Mom? This is a total invasion of our privacy. I was just trying to help. You two are being ridiculous with all this secrecy. I can't take it anymore. Linda's frustration boils over as she storms out of the room, locking herself in the nursery. Surrounded by the soft yellows and greens we picked out, I can hear the commotion continuing outside. What was meant to be a joyful day has devolved into a complete nightmare. 3 days have passed since the baby shower fiasco, and I'm still struggling to move on. I'm sitting at the kitchen table, lost in thought and staring at my phone when Mark walks in. How are you holding up, babe? He asks, concern etched on his face. Honestly, I feel awful. Your mom invaded our privacy, possibly broke the law, and ruined what was supposed to be a special day. Mark sighs and runs his hands through his hair. I know, I'm so sorry. I've been trying to talk to her, but she's not listening. Just then, my phone buzzes. It's Emily. Hey, Em, what's up? Sarah, you won't believe this. Remember Dr. Thompson from the shower? I did some dating. He's not a doctor at all. He's an actor Linda hired. I nearly dropped my phone. Are you serious? How did you find out? I recognized him from a local theater production. Emily explains. I called the theater, and they confirmed it. His real name is Steve Daniels. I passed the information along to Mark, whose face reddens with anger. That's it. I'm calling my mom right now. He puts the phone on speaker as Linda answers. Hello, dear. Have you come to your senses about the gender reveal yet? Cut the crap, Mom. We know about the fake doctor. How could you do this? There's a moment of silence before Linda responds, her voice brimming with defiance. I did what I had to do. You two were being ridiculous with all this secrecy. I can't hold back any longer, Linda. You had no right. You violated our privacy and possibly broke the law. Oh, please, I'm the grandmother. I have every right to know about my grandchild. Mark's voice turns icy. No, Mom, you don't. Until you can understand that and offer an apology, we're going to need some space. He hangs up, leaving the kitchen enveloped in a heavy silence. I need to file a complaint with the hospital, I say. If she tried to bribe my doctor, who knows what other information she might have obtained. Mark nods. I'll go with you. We need to get to the bottom of this. The next day, we're sitting in the hospital administrator's office. The woman across from us has a serious expression. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, I want to assure you that we take patient privacy very seriously. We'll conduct a full investigation into this matter. As we're leaving, Mark's phone rings. It's his dad, George. Son, we need to talk. Can you and Sarah come over? When we arrive at Mark's childhood home, George looks worn out and distressed. I'm so sorry, both of you. There's something I need to show you, George says, looking troubled. He leads us to his study and retrieves a box filled with documents. Your mother, this isn't the first time she's crossed boundaries. I've been keeping track over the years. She's always struggled with respecting limits, especially within the family. Mark looks taken aback. Dad, why didn't you ever tell us about this? George sighs deeply. I thought I could handle her behavior, but after what happened at the shower, I see now that I've been enabling her. It's time for this to stop. He hands us the box. Inside are letters, emails, and legal documents outlining Linda's past manipulative behaviors.
There was an incident with your cousin at Jenny's wedding, George explains. Linda tried to change the venue without informing anyone because she didn't like the original choice. And when your brother Tom was applying to colleges, she submitted applications in his name to schools he didn't want to attend. I feel a blend of vindication and sadness. George, thank you for showing us this. It's comforting to know we're not alone in dealing with her behavior. Mark wraps his arm around me, his voice steady and resolute. We'll get through this, Sarah, together, and we'll make sure our baby is shielded from this kind of manipulation. After going through the evidence George provided, Mark and I sit in our living room, contemplating our next steps. I can't believe it's come to this, I say, but I think we need to take legal action. Mark nods firmly. You're right, we need to protect our family. I'll call a lawyer first thing tomorrow. The next day, we're in Attorney Johnson's office, ready to discuss our options. Based on what you've shared, we have grounds for a restraining order and potentially charges for invasion of privacy and harassment, Attorney Johnson says. What about the hospital? Shouldn't they be held accountable too? I ask. We'll start with the restraining order against Linda, she replies. We can address the hospital issues separately. A week later, we receive a call from a hospital administrator. Mrs. Johnson, we've completed our investigation. I'm deeply sorry to inform you that one of our nurses, under pressure from your mother-in-law, did leak some of your confidential information. Months go by, and the long-awaited day finally arrives. In the delivery room, Mark is right beside me as our beautiful baby boy makes his entrance into the world. When I hold our son for the first time, I'm overwhelmed by how perfect he is. George, grinning from ear to ear, cradles his grandson. Sarah, he's absolutely perfect. He's got your eyes and Mark's nose. Emily chimes in with a chuckle, definitely Mark's nose. As our loved ones gather around to celebrate with us, I gaze at Mark and our son, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace and resilience. We've endured so much together. But those challenges have only made us stronger, ready to protect our little family from any harmful influences. As our story concludes, I want to ask you, if you were in my position, would you ever consider forgiving Linda and allowing her back into your child's life? Or do you believe that some actions are truly unforgivable when it comes to safeguarding your family? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences and opinions are invaluable and could help others going through similar struggles. If this story resonated with you and you'd like to hear more, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support means so much to us and allows us to continue sharing